My entire family is doing their chores without me asking, and I'm freaking the flip out. My husband was first. When I came home from work, I found my husband in the kitchen. Dish rag in hand, wiping down the counters. "Hi, babe," he said, giving me a kiss. Then he went right back to wiping. Look, I love my family, they're wonderful, but 99 of the time, when I get home from work, the kids are on the TV and my husband is on his iPad. "Thanks for cleaning," I said uneasily. And then that little thought wormed its way into my head. Was cleaning because he expects something in return? Well, that was fine by me. I was tired, but I'd happily trade sexy times for a clean kitchen. But things got weirder when I walked into the living room. My two kids weren't parked in front of the TV, watching YouTube videos of toys being unboxed and cars crashing violently. Layla was putting her stuffies in a toy bin and Ben was actually doing his homework. I stood there in shock, staring at them. "Hi, Mommy," Layla said with a big smile. "Did you have a good day?" No. My daughter, who's usually using the sofa as a jungle gym and scribbling on the walls. She was asking me if I had a good day. It was fine. Why is it so clean in here? Did Daddy take you out to the park for the day?" She shook her head. We've been drawing and stuff. She reached over to the pile of paper and pulled out a drawing. It depicted in crude stick figures, me holding her hand. "I drew this for you, Mummy." I grabbed the drawing. It said, "I love you, Mommy," with a smiley face across the top. "Thanks, that's very sweet of you, Layla." Things only got weirder from there. Dinner time is always a fight. My kids are picky as hell. And someone always spits out food at some point, but Layla and Ben ate their dinners like two normal kids without complaint. And then after my husband started doing the dishes without being asked, cue Twilight Zone music. This was getting too weird. Had they joined a cult, watched some YouTube video about kindness and discipline? Was it another fake social media holiday like Daughter's Day or Son's Day, but honouring mothers? Or was it just a good day? Occasionally, my kids were this well behaved. It was just the confluence of their behaviour. And my husband's, that was super strange. Around 7 p.m, my husband offered to watch the kids while I took a shower. But when I got out, I heard them talking in the family room. In low, hushed voices, I didn't even know my kids could talk at that volume. I started for them, but I stopped in my tracks when I heard them say my name. Layla called me Kate, not Mommy. My blood turned to ice. I stood there frozen, just beyond the doorway. "I gave Kate my drawing," Layla said, with vocabulary and diction that seemed far too mature for a 7-year-old. She seemed to like it. "Did all my homework and cleaned the bathroom," Ben added. "It's spotless in there." "Okay, good job, both of you. We need to keep this up, okay? This is what husbands and children do." With that, I heard footsteps coming my way. Heart hammering in my chest, I darted back for the stairs. As they came around the corner, I pretended I'd just come down. "You guys doing okay?" I asked, though my voice shook. What the hell is going on here? Layla ran up to me and grabbed my hand. My heart dropped at her ice-cold touch. "I want a bedtime story, Mummy." She sings songs, her voice a completely different intonation than before. "I want a bedtime story too." I glanced up at my husband. He shot me a warm smile. He goes, "Could you put them to bed tonight? I'm not feeling great." "Sure, honey." I listened to their footsteps pounding up the stairs. Then I got the flip out of there. I ran out to the car, sat there for a moment, my entire body shaking. Where are my babies? Suddenly my heart ached for Layla's tantrums, for Ben's ear-splitting shrieks as he played Minecraft, for the messes and spills and chaos. Tears running down my cheeks, I started the car and began to back out of the driveway. Beep, beep, beep. The vehicle collision alert. I stomped on the brakes and glanced in the rearview mirror. No. My husband, Layla, and Ben were standing motionless in the darkness, blocking my way out. They were no longer smiling. Their faces were set in stone as they stared me down, scowling at me in the mirror. And their eyes, oh God, their eyes, they were pure black. Instinct shut in. I flipped the car into drive and pulled over the grass. Then I peeled out of the neighbourhood. It's been an hour now. Look, I called the police, but they don't believe me. I don't know what to do next. My family is acting like my family. I'm terrified, and more than anything, I miss my babies and my husband, the good and the bad. What should I do?
Some context first. This story took place in 2020 when I was 18 years old. I lived in a relatively safe neighborhood, but my country does have a high crime rate in general, so take that with a pinch of salt. My dad had passed away earlier in the year, and I had no siblings, so my mom and I lived alone in our house. The COVID lockdowns were still in place, but as certain restrictions were lifted, people were starting to return to work. Between my house and the train tracks was a stretch of empty field. It became a safe, quiet space for me to escape to whenever I needed to get out of the house. I would normally sit there once a day for a cigarette or two, sometimes for a little picnic. My home situation was complicated, to say the least, and due to the pandemic I had nowhere else to go. On this particular day, I went there for a few minutes to smoke. As always, I was about halfway through my cigarette when I noticed a young man walking along the train tracks on the other side of the field. He was barefoot and wearing dirty, worn-out clothes. He noticed me and made a hand gesture suggesting that he was asking for a smoke. I should have just left, but as a teenager, I found it difficult to say no to people. I walked across the field and handed him a smoke. He took it from me and I immediately felt uneasy with the way he was looking at me. He asked me, "Don't you live in that house over there?" and pointed at my house. I avoided answering the question, and at this point realized that I needed to leave. I had left from my front gate that day. For him to know where I lived, he must have watched me leave from the back gate before. I told him I needed to get going. He started insisting on giving me a hug to say thank you, and I declined several times. At this point, I turned around and started walking away quickly. I didn't get very far. He caught up to me and put his arm around my waist. I panicked, not knowing what to do. All I could think of was that I needed to get away. As I tried to start running, he grabbed me from behind and started dragging me toward the row of houses where the view from the road is completely blocked. The fences were high too, so no one could see the field from their backyards. We were completely isolated. I was kicking and struggling, desperate to get out of his grasp. He ended up throwing me on the ground, with him on top of me, still holding on. In a split second, my life flashed before my eyes. That feeling that something terrible was about to happen came over me. I couldn't escape. He was too strong. My arms were trapped by his and he was holding me down, so I couldn't kick him. I did the only thing left to do and I started screaming for help. Suddenly, I was free. I could move. He had let go and jumped off of me. He ran away. My heart was still pounding. I was shaking, in shock from what had just happened. He disappeared into the industrial area on the other side of the train tracks. I immediately ran towards the road. As I reached it, I noticed it was empty. There were no cars parked in my neighbors' driveways. No one heard me screaming. And had he realized, that day could have had a far worse ending. He knew where I lived, and I was terrified of him returning. For months, I had panic attacks and nightmares, and I could barely leave my house without breaking down. I moved away from there a year later, but I still sometimes get scared when I'm home alone or walking around town. Thankfully, I never saw him again, and I hope that I never will.
So last night, I was at a classmate's house working on a group project we have due tomorrow. I live in an apartment in the town where our university is located, and my classmate lives at his parents' house, which is in the foothills just outside of town. In order to get to the house, you have to drive along a relatively secluded and narrow 2-lane road for about 5 minutes, 6 miles. We started working on the project at about 6 p.m. and I ended up hanging around for a while after we had finished our working. So I left his house pretty late at about 11 and started down the road back towards town. I didn't realize how tough it would be to navigate the road at night. There were no streetlights and the road was unkept and riddled with potholes. On top of this, I had no cell service, so I had to drive very slowly to make sure I didn't blow out one of my tires since I had used my spare a couple of weeks back. I figure I was about 3 miles from the house when I rounded a tight corner and saw a pickup truck with a camper shell parked diagonally across the road. The manner in which it was parked completely impeded my path and I couldn't drive around it because there was a gully on both sides of the road. The only way for me to go at this point was backward, where there was a pull-off that I could use to turn my car around. At first I couldn't see inside the cab, but when I turned on my high beams I saw that there was a man slouched over in the driver's seat, his head resting against the steering wheel as if he had been knocked out after a bad accident. I immediately sensed something was wrong. The way his car had just coincidentally come to rest in a position that totally blocked the road was a big red flag for me. I had heard stories of people playing dead in the road as a way to lure unsuspecting people out of their cars so they could rob them. I decided F this and elected to go back to my classmate's house and explain what was going on. I threw the car into reverse and kept my eyes darting back and forth between my rear view and the truck. I looked and saw that I was almost to the pull-off where I could turn around. When I looked back, my heart skipped about 5 beats. The man who had been slouched over in the driver's seat was now walking at my car at a hurried pace while a few other men jumped out of the camper shell and started moving towards me as well. I panicked and accelerated backwards into the pull-off, which messed up the undercarriage of my car pretty bad. As I put it into drive, the guy was already at my passenger side door tugging on the handle, which, thank the Lord, was locked. I only caught a brief glimpse of him, but his face appeared to be scabbed and leathery, definitely a meth head or some sort of drug abuser. I sped away and didn't slow down at all until I reached the house, constantly checking my rear view to see if they were following. Thankfully, they didn't tail me, and when I reached the house I explained what had happened to my classmate and we called the cops. I was grateful that my buddy's parents were kind enough to let me stay the night. They didn't find anyone on the road matching the description, but I filed an incident report and they told me they would be on the lookout for similar vehicles and suspicious activity. But holy, I'm still so shook up over it. I keep getting the same adrenaline rush I got when I saw the guy charging me whenever I think about it. Please share similar experiences you've had, as I would appreciate a good read or a good discussion to help clear my headspace.